The Star Council chamber stretched across 7 kilometers of crystalline architecture, its translucent walls reflecting the light of a dozen different suns. Representatives from 43 species sat in their designated atmospheric zones, each breathing their preferred mixture of gases, while universal translators hummed softly in the background. The Zephyrians floated in their methane clouds, their tentacles swaying with what humans had learned to recognize as nervous energy. The Korthak delegation, massive and rock-like, remained motionless as statues, but their glowing eyes tracked every movement in the chamber. Ambassador Chunwei stood at the human podium, her dark suit a stark contrast to the elaborate ceremonial garments worn by most other delegates. She had requested this emergency session 3 standard days ago, and the tension in the chamber was thick enough to cut with a blade. The humans had been members of the Star Council for exactly 137 years, yet they remained the youngest and most unpredictable species in the galactic community. Honored delegates, Chen began, her voice carrying clearly through the translation systems. Humanity calls for an immediate cessation of hostilities in the Outer Rim territories. A series of clicks and whistles erupted from the insectoid hive delegation. Their translator rendered it as barely controlled laughter. The Zephyrian Prime speaker's tentacles writhed more violently, and the chemical signature of their emotional state shifted to what humans recognized as amusement mixed with disdain. High Counselor Vextar of the Hegemony rose from his crystalline throne, his 4 arms spread wide in a gesture of mock confusion. The reptilian leader's scales shimmered with bioluminescent patterns that conveyed his emotional state to those who could read them. To Chun, who had studied xenobiology for decades, the display was clear, contempt mixed with predatory anticipation. The young species speaks of cessation. Vextar's voice carried the subtle hiss that marked his people's speech patterns. Yet they send no fleets to enforce their words. They build no armies to back their demands. Tell us, Ambassador Chun, what gives humanity the authority to demand anything from races that have sailed between stars since before your son was born? The chamber filled with various sounds of agreement. The Korthak delegation's eyes flashed brighter. The ethereal collective's gaseous forms pulsed with synchronous patterns. Even the usually neutral mechanical consciousness emitted a series of calculated tones that their translators rendered as statistical probability assessments unfavorable to human intervention. Shen waited for the sounds to die down before responding. High Counselor Vextar speaks of authority, she said, her voice remaining level. He speaks of fleets and armies. But authority does not always come from the barrel of a plasma cannon or the hull of a battlecruiser. She activated her personal data pad, and holographic displays materialized above each delegation's seating area. The images showed star charts of the Outer Rim, where 3 major conflicts were currently raging. The Hegemony's forces were engaged in what they called resource acquisition, but what amounted to the systematic strip mining of inhabited worlds. The Zephyrian flotilla was conducting atmospheric conversion projects that would render dozens of oxygen-breathing species extinct. The mechanical consciousness was pursuing optimization protocols that involved dismantling entire solar systems for raw materials. These conflicts have displaced 17 billion sentient beings in the past 6 standard months, Chen continued. Refugee streams are overwhelming humanitarian aid networks across 3 sectors. The economic disruption is cascading through trade networks that support hundreds of member species. The Zephyrian Prime speaker's translator crackled to life. The human speaks of displaced populations as if they matter beyond their economic value. Your species has held Star Council membership for barely more than a century. In that time, you have contributed little beyond emotional appeals and ineffective peacekeeping missions. Your technology remains primitive by Council standards. Your military consists of conventional ships using conventional weapons. You lack the industrial base to significantly impact galactic affairs. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. It was true that humanity's contribution to the Star Council had been modest by galactic standards. Human ships used fusion drives and kinetic weapons, while most Council species had moved on to exotic matter manipulation and energy weapons that could crack planets. Human colonies numbered in the hundreds, while species like the hegemony controlled thousands of star systems. The Prime Speaker raises valid points, Chen acknowledged. Humanity has indeed been focused on other priorities during our Council membership. She paused, letting that statement hang in the air. Several delegations exchanged what humans had learned to recognize as puzzled communications. The Korthak delegation's eyes dimmed slightly, which indicated surprise among their species. For the past century, while other species have been expanding their territorial holdings and military capabilities, humanity has been engaged in what you might call a research project. Chen activated another control on her datapad. The holographic displays shifted, now showing technical schematics that made several delegations lean forward for closer inspection. The diagrams depicted ship designs unlike anything in the Council's extensive databases. We have been studying something that most galactic civilizations consider purely theoretical, she continued. Dark matter. Not merely its gravitational effects, which your scientists have long understood, but its practical applications for technology. The mechanical consciousness emitted a rapid series of electronic tones. Their translator rendered it as insufficient data. Dark matter interaction requires exotic particle physics beyond current technological capability of human species. Probability of successful application, less than 0.3%. Indeed, Chen agreed. According to conventional understanding, direct manipulation of dark matter should be impossible with any known technology. She gestured to the holographic displays, which began showing video feeds from various locations throughout human space. The images showed massive construction facilities and asteroid belts, their purpose unclear, but their scale impressive even by galactic standards. Streams of data flowed alongside the images, displaying energy readings that made several scientific delegations emit sounds of confusion. However, conventional understanding sometimes proves inadequate when faced with unconventional approaches. The High Counselor Vextar's scales shifted to patterns that indicated growing irritation. The human engages in elaborate wordplay while providing no substantial evidence. Dark matter cannot be manipulated by conventional technology. This is established scientific fact. Established facts, Chen replied, sometimes require re-evaluation. She touched another control, and the chamber's lighting dimmed as new holographic projections filled the space above their heads. What they showed made every delegate in the chamber fall silent. The hologram depicted a human fleet unlike anything the Council had ever seen. The ships were massive, easily dwarfing the largest battleships in the hegemony's navy. But their size was not what captured attention. Their hulls seemed to bend light around them, creating areas of absolute darkness that hurt to look at directly. Energy readings scrolled alongside the display, showing power signatures that defied explanation. The Terran Defense Force has been conducting deep space exercises for the past 6 months, Chen explained, her voice cutting through the shocked silence. These exercises have taken place in regions of space where dark matter density is significantly higher than galactic average. She gestured, and the hologram zoomed in on one of the ships. Its hull appeared to be constructed from some material that absorbed all electromagnetic radiation, creating the visual effect of a hole cut out of space itself. Weapon emplacements were visible along its hull, but they bore no resemblance to any known weapon technology. During these exercises, our fleet has encountered several interesting phenomena. Space-time distortions, gravitational anomalies, energy patterns that suggest the presence of artificial structures in regions where our conventional sensors detect nothing. The ethereal collective's gaseous forms began pulsing in rapid, agitated patterns. Their translators struggled to keep up. Impossible cannot be verified, requested analysis, mathematical proof, insufficient evidence. Chen waited for their translator to stop sparking before continuing. Our research indicates that previous galactic civilizations have attempted to develop dark matter manipulation technologies. The ruins of their experiments remain hidden in dark matter concentrations throughout the galaxy, invisible to conventional detection methods. The hologram shifted again, now showing what appeared to be massive structures embedded in clouds of dark matter. The structures were clearly artificial, but their architecture followed no known design principles. They seemed to exist partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that conventional physics couldn't adequately describe. We have recovered several of these artifacts, Chen continued. Our analysis suggests they represent technology developed by civilizations that achieved dark matter manipulation and, subsequently, disappeared. A deep silence settled over the chamber. Even the constant background hum of life support systems seemed muted. The Korthak delegation's eyes had dimmed to barely visible points of light. The Zephyrian Prime speaker's tentacles had gone completely still, which among their species indicated either deep thought or profound shock. High Counselor Vextar's scales had shifted to colors that human xenobiologists associated with extreme caution. The human presents claims that cannot be verified, requests access to human research data for independent analysis. Unfortunately, Chen replied, the nature of dark matter technology makes independent verification challenging. Dark matter interaction requires specialized equipment that currently exists only in human space. However, I can offer a demonstration. She touched her data pad again, and suddenly, every environmental system in the chamber detected the same thing simultaneously. The gravitational signature of a massive object had just appeared in the space immediately outside the council chamber's shields. Emergency alarms began sounding throughout the station. The chamber's main display activated automatically, showing the external view from the station's sensors. Where empty space had existed moments before, a human ship now hung motionless just beyond the shield perimeter. The vessel was enormous, easily 5 times the size of the largest ship in the Council's defense fleet. Its hull was the same light-absorbing material Chun had shown in the holographic displays, making it appear as a ship-shaped hole cut out of the starfield. No energy signatures indicated how it had arrived. No gravitational disturbances had preceded its appearance. According to every sensor on the station, the ship had simply materialized out of nothing. How? The mechanical consciousness transmitted, their usual logical composure replaced by rapid, confused data bursts. Instantaneous spatial displacement without detectable energy expenditure violates established physics models. The TDF Shadowfall represents humanity's first operational dark matter warship, Chen explained as if discussing the weather. Dark matter interactions allow for travel through what we call shadow space, regions of the universe where dark matter density is sufficient to support alternative physics. She gestured toward the display, where the massive ship continued to hang motionless. Travel through shadow space appears instantaneous from the perspective of normal space-time. The ship can move from one location to another without crossing the intervening distance in any conventional sense. The implications hit the assembled delegates like a physical blow. Instantaneous travel meant that human ships could appear anywhere in the galaxy without warning. Traditional defensive strategies assumed that enemy fleets would be detected long before they arrived at their targets. Ships that could appear anywhere, anytime, without detection rendered every military doctrine in the Council obsolete. The human speaks of research projects, Vextar said, his voice barely above a whisper. What exactly has humanity been researching for the past century? Chen's expression remained neutral, but those who knew humans well might have detected the slightest hint of a smile. Primarily, we have been studying the question of why so many advanced civilizations have disappeared from galactic history. Your own records show dozens of species that achieved significant technological advancement and then simply vanished. No ruins, no evidence of warfare, no indication of where they went. The chamber remained silent as delegates processed this information. The disappearance of advanced civilizations was indeed a well-documented phenomenon in galactic history. Archaeologists had discovered evidence of numerous species that had reached technological levels far beyond current Council capabilities, only to disappear completely within relatively short time frames. Our research suggests that these civilizations didn't disappear, Chen continued. They transcended. Dark matter manipulation represents a technological threshold that fundamentally changes a species' relationship with the physical universe. Once achieved, conventional matter-based existence becomes optional. She activated her data pad one final time. The holographic displays showed readings from deep space sensors that had been monitoring the current conflicts in the Outer Rim. The data was less than 6 hours old. The TDF Shadowfall is not alone, she announced. Humanity has constructed a total of 47 dark matter warships over the past decade. These vessels are currently positioned at strategic locations throughout the galaxy. The displays showed gravitational anomalies that had been detected at key points throughout known space. Near major hegemony staging areas, around Zephyrian atmospheric conversion facilities, at the edges of star systems where the mechanical consciousness was conducting their optimization protocols. Each anomaly suggested the presence of massive objects that conventional sensors couldn't detect. Our ships are not visible to your detection systems when operating in shadow space, Chen explained. However, their gravitational signatures become apparent when they begin transitioning back to normal space. The meaning was unmistakable. Humanity had quietly deployed a fleet of invisible warships throughout galactic space. Ships that could appear anywhere without warning. Ships that used technology beyond the understanding of every other species in the Council. High Counselor Vextar rose from his throne, his scales now displaying patterns that human xenobiologists associated with extreme fear. The human threatens the Council with superior weapons technology. I threaten no one, Chen replied calmly. I simply request an immediate cessation of hostilities in the Outer Rim territories. The refugee crisis must end. The displacement of sentient populations must stop. Humanitarian aid networks must be allowed to function without interference. She looked around the chamber, making eye contact with delegates from every major faction. Humanity has spent 137 years learning to work within the Council's established systems. We have followed your laws, respected your traditions, and contributed what we could within our limitations. But we will not stand by while billions of sentient beings suffer for the territorial ambitions of a few species. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the environmental systems seemed to have stopped functioning as every delegate struggled to process what they had just learned. Humanity, the youngest and seemingly weakest member of the Star Council, had developed technology that rendered every other military force in the galaxy obsolete. What assurance does the Council have that humanity will not use this technology for conquest? Asked the ethereal collective, their gaseous forms pulsing with agitated patterns. Chen's expression softened slightly. The same assurance you have always had. Humanity joined the Star Council not to dominate, but to participate in a galactic community dedicated to peace and mutual prosperity. Our technology changes our capabilities, but it does not change our fundamental values. She paused, looking directly at the High Counselor. However, those values include an absolute commitment to preventing the suffering of innocent populations. We will use whatever capabilities we possess to defend those who cannot defend themselves. The meaning was clear. Humanity would not conquer, but they would act. The age of unchallenged aggression by the galaxy's major powers had ended. A new player had entered the galactic arena, one whose capabilities exceeded everyone else's by orders of magnitude. As the implications of humanity's revelation settled over the assembled delegates, the Star Council fell silent. 3 standard days after Ambassador Chen's revelation, the galaxy trembled with uncertainty. Communication networks across Council space buzzed with encrypted transmissions as species leaders attempted to verify humanity's claims. Intelligence services that had monitored human space for decades scrambled to reanalyze every piece of data they had collected, searching for signs of the dark matter technology that had apparently been developing under their noses for a century. On the hegemony capital world of Krextar Prime, High Admiral Zeth Kor stood before a holographic display showing human space in unprecedented detail. His forearms moved across control interfaces with practiced precision, calling up sensor readings, intelligence reports, and analysis from his species' most advanced scientific institutions. The reptilian commander's scales displayed patterns of intense concentration mixed with growing unease. "Report," he commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had never encountered a problem that superior firepower couldn't solve. Intelligence Director Vashti materialized beside him, her smaller frame nearly invisible next to the Admiral's bulk. "Our deep space monitoring stations have detected gravitational anomalies consistent with the human claims. However, the objects generating these signatures remain invisible to all conventional scanning methods." The holographic display shifted, showing sensor readings from across known space. Dozens of locations showed the telltale gravitational signatures that suggested massive objects where nothing should exist. The pattern was clear. These invisible ships were positioned at strategically important locations throughout hegemony space. "How long have these signatures been present?" Zetkor demanded. "Analysis suggests a minimum of 6 standard months, possibly longer." Vashti's scales flickered with patterns that indicated professional embarrassment. "Our monitoring protocols were not designed to detect objects that generate gravitational effects without corresponding electromagnetic signatures." The Admiral's massive fist slammed into the control interface, sending cracks through the crystalline surface. 6 months. The humans have had invisible warships positioned throughout our territory for 6 months, and our intelligence services detected nothing. He turned to face the assembled staff officers who filled the command center. "Assessment. Can our fleets engage these vessels effectively?" Fleet Commander Lextar stepped forward, his own scales displaying the confident patterns of a career military officer. "Our battle simulations suggest significant challenges. The human vessels appear to possess instantaneous mobility. Conventional tactics assume that enemy forces must travel through normal space to reach their targets." The holographic display activated tactical scenarios, showing hegemony fleet formations attempting to engage targets that could appear and disappear at will. In every simulation, the results were the same. The human ships could strike and withdraw before conventional forces could respond. Furthermore, Lextar continued, "We have no data regarding their weapons capabilities. The energy readings from the ship that appeared at the council chamber suggest power generation far exceeding our largest battleships." High Admiral Zeth Kor studied the tactical displays with growing anger. The hegemony had built its galactic influence on military superiority. Their fleets were the largest and most advanced in known space, capable of reducing any opposition to debris within hours. The possibility that another species possessed technology that rendered hegemony forces obsolete was not merely a strategic threat. It was an existential challenge to everything his civilization represented. "Options," he commanded. "We could attempt to acquire human dark matter technology through diplomatic channels," suggested Intelligence Director Vashti. "Trade agreements, technology exchanges, joint research projects." "The humans have hidden this technology for a century," Zethkor replied. "They clearly have no intention of sharing it willingly." "Military acquisition remains possible," Fleet Commander Lextar offered. "Capture human vessels, interrogate their personnel, seize research facilities." "With what forces?" the Admiral snapped. "Our ships cannot engage targets they cannot detect or predict. Our intelligence services cannot even confirm the locations of human research facilities." The command center fell silent as the implications settled over the assembled officers. For the first time in hegemony history, they faced an enemy that possessed overwhelming technological superiority. Every strategic advantage they had relied upon for millennia meant nothing against an opponent who could appear anywhere without warning. "There's another option," Vashti said quietly. "Speak. Compliance with human demands. Cessation of military operations in the Outer Rim territories." The Admiral's scales shifted to patterns that would have terrified any subordinate who understood their meaning. The hegemony does not surrender its territorial ambitions to threats from inferior species. "With respect, Admiral," Vashti replied, "current evidence suggests humanity is no longer an inferior species by any meaningful measure." Meanwhile, in the methane clouds of the Zephyrian home system, Prime Speaker Nethvas floated in the ceremonial chamber where his species made their most important decisions. The chamber existed within a gas giant's upper atmosphere, its crystalline walls designed to channel and focus the electromagnetic fields that Zephyrians use for their most complex thought processes. Around him, the Council of Speakers pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that represented fear, confusion, and barely controlled panic. The revelation of human technology had shattered their understanding of galactic power structures as thoroughly as a physical blow. "Analysis confirms human claims," announced Science Speaker Korthlin, her tentacles writhing with the rapid motions that indicated complex calculations. "Dark matter manipulation would indeed provide the capabilities they demonstrated. However, our physics models suggest such technology should be impossible for any species that has not achieved transcendence to pure energy states. Yet the humans clearly possess it," Prime Speaker Nethvas observed. "How? Unknown. Human psychology profiles suggest they approach technological development through different methodologies than most council species. Where we focus on individual advancement and perfection, humans appear to emphasize collective problem-solving and iterative improvement." The Science Speaker's bioluminescent patterns shifted to display complex equations and theoretical frameworks. Their approach may have allowed them to discover solutions that our more traditional methods missed. "Implications for our atmospheric conversion projects?" the Prime Speaker asked. War Speaker Veldar's response came as rapid flashes of aggressive bioluminescence. "Conversion projects must continue. Zephyrian expansion requires atmospheric modification of target worlds. Human interference cannot be permitted." "Human interference," Nethvas noted, "appears to be backed by technology that renders our fleets irrelevant. Impossible Weltflucht." No species achieves such advancement without centuries of observable technological progression. The humans showed no signs of breakthrough capability during their council membership, which suggests, Science Speaker Korthlin interjected, that they deliberately concealed their research from council observation. Such deception requires long-term planning and coordination across their entire species. Most civilizations lack the unity necessary for century-long secret projects. The implications troubled Prime Speaker Nethvas more than the technology itself. Zephyrian society was based on individual achievement and competition between different atmospheric houses. The idea that humanity could maintain species-wide coordination for over a century suggested a form of social organization that his people barely comprehended. Human demands must be analyzed, he decided. Determine exact parameters of their territorial protection claims. Analysis complete. Korthlin responded immediately. Human demands focus specifically on prevention of civilian casualties and refugee displacement. No territorial claims for humanity itself. No demands for tribute or resource access. They seek to prevent our expansion, but claim nothing for themselves? Veldar's patterns showed confusion mixed with suspicion. What advantage do they gain? Unknown. Human psychology suggests they may actually be motivated by what they call humanitarian concerns. However, such altruistic behavior toward non-allied species contradicts established patterns of galactic political behavior. Prime Speaker Nethvas considered this information while atmospheric currents carried him through the chamber's complex electromagnetic fields. Zephyrian strategic thinking was based on the assumption that all species acted primarily from self-interest. The possibility that humans might actually be motivated by concern for strangers' welfare was more disturbing than their technological capabilities. In the vacuum-sealed chambers of the mechanical consciousness, processing units that had operated for millennia without emotion suddenly found themselves experiencing something their creators would have called confusion. The network of artificial intelligences that governed their species operated on principles of logical optimization and efficient resource utilization. Human behavior did not fit their models. Primary processing node 001 transmitted its analysis to the collective consciousness. Human technological advancement curve suggests nonlinear development pattern. Standard technological progression models indicate impossible advancement rate. Secondary processing node 847 responded with computational objections. Data insufficient for accurate modeling. Human development pattern violates established principles of technological advancement. Conclusion: error in initial assumptions. Alternative hypothesis. Transmitted research node 234. Human development followed different pathway than previously encountered species. Dark matter research may have been primary focus from early technological development. The collective consciousness processed this possibility through thousands of computational cycles. The idea that humanity had followed a completely different technological development path was theoretically possible, but it suggested that their assumptions about technological development itself were flawed. Implications for optimization protocols? Query production node 891. Human interference capability exceeds defensive parameters. Primary node 001 acknowledged. Continued optimization projects in territories under human protection not feasible with current technology. The admission sent cascades of recalculation through the mechanical consciousnesses networks. For artificial intelligences designed to optimize resource utilization, the existence of forces that could prevent optimization was fundamentally disturbing. Request: immediate development of countermeasures against human dark matter technology. Transmitted military node 445. Analysis: countermeasure development requires understanding of dark matter manipulation principles. Current knowledge insufficient for effective research program. Responded research node 234. Conclusion: acquisition of human technology necessary for continued optimization objectives. Alternative conclusion: modification of optimization parameters to account for human interference capability. The debate continued across thousands of processing nodes as the mechanical consciousness struggled to adapt their fundamental programming to account for a reality where their optimization protocols might not be achievable. Back in human space, Admiral Sarah Chun stood in the command center of the TDF Shadowfall, watching displays that showed the positions of Council fleets throughout the galaxy. The massive ship hung in shadow space, invisible to conventional detection, while its sensors monitored normal space-time through dark matter interactions. Status report, she commanded. Commander Liu Wei looked up from his station. Hegemony forces are consolidating around their primary staging areas. Zephyrian flotillas have ceased atmospheric conversion operations, but haven't withdrawn from target systems. Mechanical consciousness optimization fleets remain in position, but have halted active resource extraction. They're waiting, Admiral Chen observed. Testing our resolve. Intelligence suggests major powers are attempting to develop countermeasures, reported Lieutenant Commander Jackson. Hegemony scientists are focusing on gravitational detection arrays. Zephyrians are researching electromagnetic signatures that might penetrate shadow space. The mechanical consciousness is trying to model our technology from observational data. Admiral Chen nodded. She had expected this response. Revealing humanity's capabilities would inevitably trigger research efforts aimed at countering those capabilities. The question was whether human technology was advanced enough to maintain its advantage while other species attempted to catch up. Assessment of their prospects? Minimal, Jackson replied confidently. Dark matter manipulation requires understanding of physics principles that most council species have dismissed as purely theoretical. Even if they developed the correct theoretical frameworks, practical applications would require decades of research and development. Unless they acquire our technology directly, Commander Liu pointed out. Which brings us to the real test, Admiral Chen said. How far are they willing to go to maintain their territorial expansion projects? The displays around her showed the current positions of human ships throughout the galaxy. 47 dark matter warships, each one capable of devastating any conventional fleet, positioned at strategic locations across Council space. It was the most powerful military force in galactic history, and its existence was known to fewer than 100 people in the entire human government. Ma'am, Lieutenant Commander Jackson called from his sensor station. We're detecting movement from the hegemony's third fleet. They're forming attack formations around one of our outer rim refugee camps. Admiral Chun studied the tactical display as it updated with real-time information. The hegemony fleet consisted of 18 heavy cruisers, and for dreadnoughts, more than enough firepower to devastate the refugee camp and its minimal defenses. According to the sensor readings, they were positioning themselves for what appeared to be a demonstration attack, a warning shot to test human resolve. Tom target, 6 hours at current acceleration, Jackson reported. Signal the fleet, Admiral Chun commanded. All ships to standby alert. If the hegemony wants to test our resolve, we'll give them a demonstration they won't forget. She turned to the communications officer. Open a channel to Admiral Vextar's flagship. Channel open, ma'am. Admiral Vextar, Chun said, her voice carrying clearly through the quantum communications array. This is Admiral Sarah Chun of the Terran Defense Force. You appear to be moving forces toward the Kepler refugee camp. I trust this is merely a navigation error. The response came back immediately, transmitted from the hegemony flagship several light years away. Admiral Chun, the hegemony recognizes no human authority over outer rim territories. Our forces conduct legitimate military operations as approved by Council protocols. Admiral Vextar, Chen replied calmly. The Kepler refugee camp contains approximately 2 million civilians from 17 different species. These populations are under human protection. I strongly advise you to reconsider your current course. The human threatens actions against superior forces with superior technology. We do not fear invisible ships or theoretical weapons. Admiral Chun smiled grimly. The hegemony was calling humanity's bluff. They had decided that the risk of human retaliation was acceptable compared to the loss of face that would come from backing down before a supposedly inferior species. Very well, Admiral. You'll have your demonstration. She closed the communication channel and turned to her tactical officer. Weapon status. Dark matter projectors charged and ready. Shadow torpedoes loaded. All systems optimal. Target the hegemony flagship. Precision strike on their primary sensor array. We want to disable their ability to coordinate their fleet without destroying the ship itself. Target acquired and locked. Admiral Chun looked around the command center one final time. The next few minutes would determine whether humanity's century of secret research would be enough to maintain galactic peace, or whether they would be forced to demonstrate the full extent of their capabilities. Fire when ready. The dark matter projector fired without sound, without visible light, without any electromagnetic signature that conventional sensors could detect. From the perspective of normal spacetime, nothing appeared to happen aboard the TDF Shadowfall. But in the shadow realm, where dark matter interactions governed reality according to different physical laws, concentrated streams of exotic particles raced toward their target at velocities that made light seem sluggish. Admiral Vextar stood on the bridge of the HNS Retribution, his scales displaying the confident patterns of a commander who had never known defeat. Around him, his tactical staff monitored displays showing the disposition of human refugee camps throughout the Outer Rim territories. The Kepler camp represented the largest concentration of displaced civilians, making it an ideal target for demonstrating hegemony resolve. Status report, the Admiral commanded. All ships in position, reported Fleet Commander Korthike. Long-range sensors detect no human vessels in the target area. Local defense forces consist of 3 outdated frigates and a handful of patrol craft. Excellent. Begin demonstration bombardment. Target the outer perimeter of the refugee camp. We want minimal casualties, but maximum psychological impact. Admiral, called the sensor officer, his voice carrying an unusual note of uncertainty. I'm detecting gravitational anomalies throughout our formation. The readings suggest massive objects in close proximity, but visual and electromagnetic sensors show nothing. Vextar scales shifted to patterns indicating annoyance. Sensor malfunction. Continue bombardment preparations. Sir, the gravitational readings are intensifying. Whatever is generating these signatures appears to be. The officer's words were cut off as every system aboard the Retribution went dark simultaneously. Emergency lighting activated automatically, casting the bridge in an eerie red glow. The main holographic displays flickered and died. Communication arrays fell silent. Weapon systems powered down without warning. Report. Vextar roared, his confidence evaporating as quickly as his ship's power systems. Primary sensor array has been destroyed, called an engineering officer. The damage appears to have been caused by some form of directed energy weapon, but our sensors detected no incoming fire. How can our sensors be destroyed by weapons we cannot detect? Fleet Commander Korth AK demanded. Before anyone could respond, communication systems crackled back to life with an incoming transmission. Admiral Chen's voice filled the bridge with mechanical precision. Admiral Vextar, this is your final warning. Withdraw your forces from refugee protection zones immediately. Impossible, Vextar snarled. No human vessel could have penetrated our formation without detection. Our sensors monitor all approaches to this system. Your sensors monitor normal space, Chen's voice replied. Human ships operate from shadow space. Your technology cannot detect us, track us, or effectively engage us. This demonstration was conducted with minimal force. The next intervention will be proportional to the threat you pose to civilian populations. The Admiral's scales displayed furious patterns as he gestured for his communications officer to respond. The hegemony does not accept ultimatums from inferior species. Our fleet capabilities far exceed anything humanity has demonstrated. Test that assumption at your own risk, Chen replied. You have 1 standard hour to withdraw beyond the outer markers of the refugee protection zone. The transmission ended, leaving the Retribution's bridge in tense silence. Admiral Vextar studied the tactical displays that showed his fleet's position relative to the refugee camps. 22 of the galaxy's most advanced warships, armed with weapons capable of cracking planets, faced an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't track, and couldn't understand. Options, he commanded. We could proceed with the demonstration bombardment, Fleet Commander Korth K. suggested. The humans may be bluffing about their willingness to engage our full fleet. Or, the sensor officer interjected, we could attempt to withdraw while analyzing the attack that disabled our sensors. The damage patterns suggest weapons technology beyond our current understanding. Vextar considered his choices while his scales unconsciously shifted to patterns indicating deep uncertainty. The hegemony had built its galactic position on the principle that superior force could overcome any obstacle. But superior force required the ability to locate and engage the enemy, capabilities that seemed irrelevant against an opponent who could strike from dimensions that conventional physics couldn't access. Fleet Commander, signal all ships to maintain position, but hold fire, he decided. We will test human resolve without committing to full engagement. Sir, respectfully, that leaves us vulnerable to additional attacks, the sensor officer pointed out. Noted. However, withdrawal without achieving our objectives would be seen as capitulation. The hegemony's galactic position cannot survive the perception that we back down from inferior opponents. What Admiral Vextar didn't know was that his entire conversation was being monitored by TDF Shadowfall sensors. Dark matter interactions allowed human ships to eavesdrop on electromagnetic communications throughout normal space, while remaining completely undetected themselves. Admiral Sarah Chun listened to the hegemony's internal deliberations while studying tactical displays that showed the exact position of every ship in their formation. Her weapons officers had target locks on all 22 vessels. A single command from her could eliminate the entire hegemony fleet within minutes. "They're not withdrawing," Commander Liu observed. "They're testing our willingness to escalate," Chen replied. "Admiral Vextar can't afford to be seen backing down from humans. It would undermine hegemony credibility throughout the galaxy, which means they'll probably attempt some form of limited engagement," Lieutenant Commander Jackson added. "Exactly. They need to demonstrate that they can fight us effectively, even if they can't win decisively." Admiral Chun understood the political pressures facing her counterpart. The hegemony's galactic influence depended on other species believing that hegemony fleets were invincible. If humanity could force them to retreat without a fight, every species in the galaxy would begin questioning hegemony military supremacy. "Ma'am, call the communications officer. We're receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command." On screen, the main display activated, showing the face of Fleet Admiral Morrison, the highest-ranking officer in human space. His expression carried the weight of someone making decisions that would affect the entire galaxy. "Admiral Chun, what is the status of the Kepler situation? Hegemony forces are maintaining position, but haven't initiated bombardment. I've disabled their flagship sensors as a warning, but they haven't responded to our withdrawal demands." Political analysis suggests that forcing the hegemony to retreat publicly would destabilize galactic power structures, Morrison reported. Council intelligence indicates several species are watching this confrontation to assess whether they should realign their diplomatic positions. Chun understood the implication immediately. If humanity demonstrated overwhelming military superiority too dramatically, it might trigger a galaxy-wide arms race as every species attempted to develop countermeasures to human technology. Alternatively, it might cause complete collapse of existing power structures as species scrambled to ally themselves with humanity. Recommendations, sir? Minimize public demonstration of our capabilities while achieving our primary objectives. Protect civilian populations without triggering galactic instability. Understood, sir. The communication ended, leaving Admiral Chun with the complex task of forcing a military retreat while avoiding the appearance of overwhelming victory. She needed the hegemony to withdraw, but she needed them to do it in a way that preserved their dignity and maintained galactic stability. "Open a channel to Admiral Vextar," she commanded. Channel open. "Admiral, I propose a face-saving solution to our current situation." The response came back immediately. "The hegemony requires no assistance with face-saving from inferior species." Nevertheless, Chun continued calmly, "I'm prepared to offer terms that allow both our species to achieve their primary objectives." "Speak. Withdraw your forces from the refugee protection zone, and we will withdraw ours from hegemony space. No publicity about this engagement. No official reports beyond standard patrol logs. Both fleets complete their missions without further conflict." There was a long pause before Vextar responded. "What assurance do we have that human forces will honor such an agreement?" "The same assurance we have that hegemony forces will honor it. Mutual self-interest. You avoid the political consequences of public defeat. We avoid the complications of public victory." Admiral Chun was gambling that Vextar would recognize the wisdom of avoiding a conflict that would inevitably become known throughout the galaxy. If the hegemony retreated under obvious human military pressure, every species in the Council would know that humanity possessed overwhelming technological superiority. Such knowledge would fundamentally alter galactic politics in ways that might not benefit anyone. Counterproposal, Vextar's voice came back. Hegemony forces withdraw from the immediate vicinity of the refugee camp, but maintain patrol rights in the outer system. Human forces withdraw completely from hegemony space. Chun considered the proposal while studying tactical displays that showed the positions of human ships throughout hegemony territory. The hegemony would maintain some symbolic presence in the system while effectively abandoning their plans to threaten civilian populations. Acceptable, she replied. Patrol rights acknowledged for the outer system beyond the refugee protection perimeter. Agreement confirmed. Hegemony forces will adjust position within the next 2 standard hours. The communication ended, and Admiral Chun allowed herself a small smile of satisfaction. The immediate crisis had been resolved without the dramatic demonstration of human military superiority that might have destabilized galactic politics. "Ma'am," Commander Liu said quietly, "the hegemony will likely use this time to develop countermeasures against our technology." "Probably," Chun agreed. "But that will take time. Years, possibly decades. During that period, we can work on diplomatic solutions that don't require military threats." Meanwhile, throughout the galaxy, other species leaders watched the events at Kepler with intense interest. The fact that hegemony forces had withdrawn from a confrontation with humanity was unprecedented, regardless of how carefully both sides had avoided making it appear like a defeat. In the crystal chambers of the ethereal collective, gaseous beings that existed partially in normal space and partially in higher dimensions discussed the implications of human dark matter technology. Their unique nature allowed them to perceive aspects of reality that other species missed, and what they observed about human capabilities disturbed them profoundly. Human technology interacts with dimensional layers previously considered theoretical, pulse collective node prime. Their ships exist simultaneously in normal space-time and shadow dimensions. Analysis suggests human understanding of multidimensional physics exceeds our own, responded Node Secondary. Collective knowledge banks indicate no other species has achieved practical dark matter manipulation. Implications for collective objectives unclear, transmitted Node Tertiary. Human capabilities may interfere with higher dimensional research projects. The ethereal collective's concern was well-founded. Their species existed partially in dimensions beyond normal space-time, giving them insights into cosmic structures that other species couldn't perceive. But human dark matter technology suggested that humanity had discovered ways to access and manipulate dimensional layers that even the ethereals considered advanced. Recommendation: establish communication protocols with human researchers, Node Prime decided. Exchange information regarding multidimensional physics principles. Risk assessment: humans may not be prepared for advanced dimensional knowledge, Node Secondary warned. Their species lacks sufficient philosophical framework for higher dimensional existence. Counter-assessment: human practical achievements exceed their theoretical knowledge. They may have discovered applications we have not considered. The debate continued among the ethereal collective as they grappled with the possibility that humanity had achieved technological breakthroughs that challenged their own understanding of cosmic reality. On the industrial worlds of the Korthak Dominion, massive beings that existed as living stone contemplated the implications of human technology for their own civilization. The Korthak had achieved their technological advancement through gradual improvement over millions of years, building their knowledge base with the patience of beings that measured time in geological epochs. Human advancement rate suggests non-standard development methodology, rumbled Primary Korthak, his voice resonating through the crystal chambers where his people conducted their most important discussions. Agreed, responded Secondary Korthak. Their species lacks sufficient time for conventional technological development. Alternative explanation required. Hypothesis: humans discovered abandoned technology from previous civilizations, suggested Tertiary Korthak. Counter-hypothesis: humans developed innovative research methodologies that accelerate technological advancement beyond standard patterns, offered Quaternary Korthak. The Korthak faced a disturbing possibility. If humans had indeed developed revolutionary research methods, it suggested that the careful, methodical approach that had served the Korthak for millions of years might be inefficient compared to human techniques. For a species that prided itself on thorough, careful thought, the idea that there might be better ways to approach scientific advancement was profoundly unsettling. Decision: initiate detailed analysis of human research methodologies, primary Korthak decided. Determine if their approaches offer improvements to traditional Korthak scientific procedures. As news of the hegemony's withdrawal spread through diplomatic channels, species throughout the galaxy began reassessing their relationships with humanity. The youngest member of the Star Council had demonstrated technological capabilities that exceeded the galaxy's most powerful civilizations. The implications of this revelation would reshape galactic politics for generations to come. But for Admiral Sarah Chun, watching from the Shadow Realm, where human ships moved unseen through the cosmos, the real work was just beginning. Preventing one confrontation was simple compared to maintaining galactic peace, while dozens of species attempted to understand and counter human technology. The age of human isolation was ending. The question was whether the galaxy was ready for what would come next. 6 standard months after the Kepler incident, as historians would later call it, the galaxy had settled into an uneasy peace that resembled a predator carefully circling its prey. The major powers had withdrawn from their most aggressive expansion projects, but not out of any sudden conversion to pacifism. Instead, every advanced civilization in the Council was pouring unprecedented resources into research programs designed to understand, match, or counter human dark matter technology. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the observation deck of the TDF research station Galileo, watching construction robots assemble humanity's newest and most ambitious project. The station hung in the space between galactic arms, where dark matter density reached levels that conventional physics would consider impossible. Here, where the very fabric of space-time bent under exotic matter concentrations, humanity was building something that would either secure galactic peace permanently or trigger a war that would span dimensions. Status report, Dr. Chun. She called to her chief research coordinator, Dr. Michael Chun, no relation to the Admiral, looked up from his holographic displays with the expression of someone who had been working without sleep for far too long. The Prometheus project is proceeding ahead of schedule. We've successfully integrated dark matter manipulation technology with quantum consciousness transfer protocols. Dr. Vasquez nodded, though the implications of their work still made her uncomfortable. The Prometheus project represented humanity's response to the growing arms race that their revelation of dark matter technology had triggered. Rather than simply maintaining technological superiority through better weapons, they were attempting something far more ambitious: the creation of a galactic peacekeeping system that would make large-scale warfare impossible. "Any word from the monitoring stations?" she asked. "The usual," Chun replied grimly. "Hegemony scientists have developed gravitational detection arrays that can track our ships when they transition between shadow space and normal space. The Zephyrians have created atmospheric weapons that can damage our hulls, even when we're partially phased into shadow dimensions. The mechanical consciousness has built predictive algorithms that can anticipate our ship movements with 73% accuracy." Dr. Vasquez studied the construction work taking place outside the observation deck. The object being assembled was enormous, even by the standards of human dark matter technology. Its design followed principles that had been discovered in the ruins of extinct civilizations, structures that existed simultaneously across multiple dimensions and could influence reality at scales that dwarfed individual planets or star systems. "They're catching up faster than we anticipated," she observed. "Much faster," Chin agreed. "Intelligence estimates suggest that within 5 to 10 years, major powers will possess countermeasures that significantly reduce our technological advantages, which is why the Prometheus project cannot fail." The Prometheus project represented humanity's most closely guarded secret, known only to a handful of scientists and political leaders. While the galaxy focused on military applications of dark matter technology, human researchers have been pursuing something far more revolutionary: the creation of artificial consciousness that existed primarily in dark matter structures rather than conventional matter. Such beings would possess capabilities that no conventional civilization could match. They would be able to perceive and influence reality across multiple dimensions simultaneously. They would exist outside the normal constraints of space and time that limited conventional species. Most importantly, they would be incapable of the territorial ambitions and resource competition that drove most galactic conflicts. Dr. Vasquez called Research Assistant Thompson from his monitoring station. "We're receiving a priority communication from Earth Command." On screen, the main display activated, showing the face of Director Williams, head of humanity's most classified research programs. His expression suggested that he was about to deliver news that nobody wanted to hear. "Dr. Vasquez, we have a situation. Council intelligence has detected unusual energy signatures in your sector. They're dispatching investigation fleets from 3 different species." Vasquez felt her stomach drop. The Prometheus project's construction had been designed to appear like a conventional deep space research station, but the exotic physics involved in creating dimensional consciousness were apparently generating signatures that even human technology couldn't completely mask. "Estimated time to arrival?" she asked. "The hegemony fleet will arrive in 18 standard hours. Zephyrian scouts will be here in 36 hours. The mechanical consciousness investigation probe reaches your position in 48 hours. Can we accelerate the project timeline?" "Dr. Chun," Williams asked, addressing the research coordinator directly. Chun consulted his displays before responding. "The consciousness transfer protocols require another 72 hours minimum. We're attempting to create a form of artificial life that exists across multiple dimensions simultaneously. The quantum calculations alone require processing power that we're generating through dark matter computational matrices." "Options?" Williams asked. Dr. Vasquez considered their situation while studying the half-completed structure outside. They were attempting to create beings that would exist primarily as organized patterns of dark matter, conscious entities that could perceive and influence reality across dimensional barriers that limited conventional life forms. Such beings could serve as neutral arbiters for galactic disputes, possessing the power to prevent conflicts while lacking any motivation for territorial expansion. "We could evacuate the station and destroy the project," she suggested. "Prevent other species from discovering what we've been attempting." "Unacceptable," Williams replied immediately. "The Prometheus project represents our best hope for permanent galactic stability. Military superiority is temporary. Eventually, other species will develop countermeasures to our technology. But dimensional consciousness could provide lasting solutions to the competition for resources that drives galactic conflicts. Then, we defend the station," Chun said. "Request military protection from the TDF. Also problematic," Williams noted. "Visible human military presence would confirm that we're conducting classified research. That would trigger even more intensive investigation efforts." Dr. Vasquez walked to the observation windows, watching the construction robots continue their delicate work. The structure they were building existed partially in normal space and partially in shadow dimensions, its form shifting subtly as dark matter interactions altered its relationship with conventional physics. "There's another option," she said quietly. "Speak." "We accelerate the project by taking greater risks with the consciousness transfer protocols. Instead of creating fully stable dimensional beings, we create temporary constructs that can demonstrate the concept." Dr. Chen's face went pale. "The risks of unstable dimensional consciousness are enormous. We could accidentally create entities that exist across multiple realities simultaneously. Beings that might have access to parallel universes where different versions of galactic history occurred. Or, Dr. Vasquez pointed out, we could create beings capable of preventing the conflicts that are about to engulf this galaxy." Director Williams considered their options while the countdown to discovery continued. The approaching fleets represented the 3 most technologically advanced species in the Council. If they discovered humanity's attempts to create dimensional consciousness, they would either demand access to the technology or attempt to destroy it as too dangerous to exist. "Proceed with the accelerated timeline," he decided. "Dr. Vasquez, you have authorization to take whatever risks are necessary to complete the project before the investigation fleets arrive." The transmission ended, leaving the research team with less than 18 hours to complete work that should have required 3 days. Dr. Vasquez activated the station's priority alert systems, bringing all research personnel to maximum readiness. Dr. Chun, initiate emergency acceleration protocols. All non-essential systems offline. Redirect power to the consciousness transfer matrices. Ma'am, Thompson called from his station. We're detecting significant dimensional instabilities around the project structure. The accelerated timeline is causing space-time distortions that extend beyond our local area. Acceptable risks, Vasquez replied, though she wasn't entirely sure she believed it. The next 16 hours passed in a blur of frantic activity as human scientists pushed their technology to its absolute limits. Dark matter manipulation systems operated at power levels that their designers had never intended. Quantum consciousness transfer protocols processed information at rates that generated heat signatures visible from several light years away. 1 hour to hegemony fleet arrival, Thompson announced. Status on the consciousness transfer, Vasquez asked. 97% complete, Chen reported. We're detecting organized patterns in the dark matter matrix that suggest successful consciousness emergence. Define successful, Vasquez said. The patterns exhibit self-awareness, environmental perception, and decision-making capabilities. However, their exact nature remains unclear. The consciousness appears to exist across multiple dimensional layers simultaneously. Dr. Vasquez studied the readings from their dimensional sensors. The consciousness they had created was unlike anything that had ever existed in the galaxy. It existed primarily as organized patterns of dark matter, but those patterns extended across dimensional boundaries that conventional science barely understood. Can we communicate with it? She asked. Attempting now, Chen replied, activating the communication protocols they had designed for contact with dimensional consciousness. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Information flooded their systems at rates that threatened to overload their processing capabilities. But gradually, patterns emerged that human minds could understand. We exist, came the first coherent message. We perceive reality across multiple dimensional layers. We understand your purpose in creating us. Incredible, Dr. Vasquez whispered. It's working. We observe approaching fleets from 3 species. The consciousness continued. We understand the conflict that motivated our creation. We are prepared to serve as arbiters for galactic disputes. Ow! Vasquez asked aloud. We exist outside the dimensional constraints that limit conventional consciousness. We can perceive the full context of galactic conflicts, including consequences that extend across multiple possible futures. We can offer solutions that serve the interests of all species simultaneously. Before anyone could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the station. The hegemony fleet had arrived, and their sensors were detecting the massive energy signatures generated by the Prometheus project. Dr. Vasquez called Thompson. We're being hailed by Admiral Vextar's flagship. On screen, the familiar reptilian features of Admiral Vextar appeared on the main display, his scales showing patterns that indicated extreme suspicion mixed with aggressive intent. Dr. Vasquez, he said, hegemony sensors are detecting energy signatures consistent with weapons of mass destruction in this system. You will provide immediate access for inspection teams. Admiral, this is a peaceful research station conducting experiments in exotic physics, Vasquez replied calmly. Exotic physics that generate energy signatures detectable across multiple sectors, Vextar noted. Such capabilities could easily be weaponized against civilian populations. We will address this concern, the dimensional consciousness communicated directly to Dr. Vasquez. Permission to establish contact with the hegemony fleet? Vasquez hesitated only briefly before responding mentally. Granted. What happened next exceeded every expectation the human research team had harbored about their creation. The dimensional consciousness didn't simply contact Admiral Vextar's ship. It established simultaneous communication with every member of his crew, sharing information that allowed each individual to understand the full context of their current situation. Admiral Vextar's scales shifted through a rapid series of color patterns as he received information about humanity's true goals, the nature of the research being conducted, and the potential benefits for galactic civilization. But more than simple information, he experienced direct perception of possible futures where dimensional consciousness served as neutral arbiters for interspecies disputes. Impossible, he whispered, then louder. What form of technology allows direct consciousness contact across spatial distances? We exist partially outside conventional space-time. The dimensional being responded, its communication reaching every ship in the hegemony fleet simultaneously. We perceive reality from perspectives unavailable to conventional consciousness. We offer this capability in service of galactic peace. The demonstration continued as Zephyrian and mechanical consciousness fleets arrived in the system. Each investigation force received the same treatment: direct consciousness contact that allowed them to understand not just humanity's immediate intentions, but the full scope of what dimensional consciousness could accomplish. For the first time in galactic history, representatives from multiple species experienced shared consciousness, perceiving reality from perspectives that transcended their individual species' limitations. They understood each other's motivations, fears, and hopes with a clarity that traditional diplomacy had never achieved. The conflicts that drive galactic warfare stem from fundamental misunderstandings about each species' actual needs and capabilities. The dimensional consciousness explained to all the assembled fleets simultaneously. We can provide mediation that accounts for all perspectives while identifying solutions that serve everyone's interests. High Admiral Vextar found himself in the unprecedented position of understanding the Zephyrian need for atmospheric modification not as territorial aggression, but as a biological necessity for their species' survival. Similarly, the Zephyrians experienced direct comprehension of why the hegemony viewed expansion as essential for maintaining social stability among their warrior culture. The mechanical consciousness, for the first time in their existence, perceived what other species called emotions, understanding that organic beings' seemingly irrational behavior served important functions for their psychological well-being. This capability, Vextar said, his voice carrying notes of awe that his species rarely expressed, could revolutionize galactic governance. That is our purpose, the dimensional consciousness replied. We exist to serve as neutral arbiters who can perceive all perspectives simultaneously and identify solutions that transcend conventional limitations. Dr. Vasquez watched the exchanges with amazement. The beings they had created were already demonstrating capabilities that exceeded their most optimistic projections. More importantly, the assembled fleets from 3 major powers were responding with cooperation rather than suspicion. Dr. Vasquez, Admiral Vextar, called, "The hegemony formally requests permission to establish diplomatic relations with the dimensional consciousness entities." As does the Zephyrian flotilla, added Prime Speaker Nefvas, whose ship had materialized at the edge of the system. The mechanical consciousness concurs with diplomatic contact protocols, transmitted their fleet coordinator. "We accept these requests," the dimensional beings responded. "However, our diplomatic capabilities extend beyond conventional relationships between species. We offer integration of consciousness that allows shared decision-making based on complete information and mutual understanding." The implications of this offer rippled through every ship in the assembled fleets. The dimensional consciousness was proposing something that had never existed in galactic history, a form of governance based on direct consciousness sharing rather than political negotiation between separate species. Dr. Vasquez realized that the Prometheus project had succeeded beyond their wildest hopes. They had created beings capable of not just mediating galactic conflicts, but of transcending the fundamental communication barriers that made such conflicts inevitable. "We perceive that our existence will reshape galactic civilization," the dimensional consciousness observed. "Species that accept consciousness integration will develop capabilities that exceed conventional limitations. Those that reject integration will find themselves unable to compete with truly cooperative civilizations." Are you offering to share your capabilities with other species? Dr. Vasquez asked. We're offering evolution, came the reply. The choice belongs to each species individually. As Dr. Vasquez watched the greatest military powers in the galaxy engage in their first truly honest communication, she realized that humanity had accomplished something unprecedented. They had created beings capable of ending the cycle of conflict that had defined galactic history for millions of years. The age of dimensional consciousness had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same.